Is everything all about attachment? And what about these enactments, these corrective experiences? Am I going to make them codependent on each other, enmeshed with each other? And then what about things like healthy differentiation and, all these things so we need to take time and get clearer on this about what scares therapists. Are we going to create a form of enmeshment that's unhealthy for our clients?
Welcome to the Leading Edge in Emotionally Focused Therapy with your hosts, Dr. James Hawkins and Dr. Ryan Rana. EFT is a dynamic model that humbles even the most seasoned therapists. Together, we want to come alongside you as you continually push the leading edge of your understanding and application of this wonderful model developed by Dr. Sue Johnson.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Ryan. This is really an idea that's kind of been in Ryan's head. I've experienced it some, about really breaking that down from the teaser. It's, how much are we making this about attachment? How much does it get into are we facilitating some form of codependency? What about people's ability to do some self-regulation? Are we only promoting co-regulation as the only way people can thrive in the world? And that does scare some therapists. I know I hear it in training sometimes, Ryan.
Yeah, it does. And you said you're looking forward to this. I kind of dread it because it's so controversial.
Yeah.
And it can start to take on the form of this debate and an argument. And frankly, I'm just too old for that. Mm-hmm. I really am. I don't think I see these debates and I don't think they ever get anywhere. I don't have any desire to speak negatively about anyone else's work or tell them they're wrong. Mm-hmm. I want to start from a position of humility because it's true. I don't have all the answers. Mm-hmm. Human behavior is complex. It's also cultural. Mm-hmm. Some rules don't apply to everybody else in the same way. And this is going to be a theory-heavy episode. Mm-hmm. So I tend to dread and put this off, but this is like the number 1 or 2 most requested topic for me. Mm-hmm. So sorry, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of you who have said, please do an episode on this. It's been like a year or more since it was requested, but here we are. We're going to do it. We're going to have the conversation today. We reserve the right to be wrong.
That's right.
And to do this again, part 2 or something.
Mm-hmm. And here's why I'm excited about it, because I do think it needs to be talked about. And because I don't think when we're going out and we're teaching EFT, we're not trying to become rigid in any one camp. For me, and you tell me, I'll lead out, and then I want to really interview you some, Ryan, on this. I always tell people, though this one actually, sorry, I'm going all around. I just got to read a preliminary article written by Dr. Julia Conroy, who's been on the episode. And as she started out in the article, part of what she was talking about this is the research she did with you, Ryan. Sorry, going back to that article. She did talk about the role of co-regulation and self-regulation. Yep. And one of the key quotes was that we learn self-regulation by the experiences we have with co-regulation.
There you go. You just ruined my whole point. That's the whole point of this episode. That's good, though. No, you can't say it too many times.
But they go hand in hand. So that's why Ryan is saying we're not trying to fall in any ditch, because either one's a ditch. You have to have flexibility with both.
Except for when you only think that self-regulation is what matters, it's upside down.
Yep.
And that's the piece for me that's so key. So let's just, this is the point of the episode. Then we'll sort of talk around this and come back to order matters. Mm-hmm. Right? Of course, there are absolutely times where we need to self-regulate. There's times, there's space for all these concepts as being on a continuum, but not, my bias would say, not equally. There's an order. Mm-hmm. So if you see someone who cannot self-regulate, and I'll tell you the first place I ever saw this was coaching. I got a roster of 32, I call them kids. They're 18 to 25-year-old young men. I coached males only in baseball. And, when the pressure would hit, and I promise you this, it always did, you see who can tolerate and who can sort of take a few deep breaths and handle things. And then there would always be a kid or 3 on a team who could not do it. Mm-hmm. They would lose it, almost to the point of being kicked out of games, almost losing scholarships. So they could not self-regulate. And that was almost always could fairly easily be drawn back to they did not have enough experiences being co-regulated with in their growing up years. Mm-hmm. So self-regulation is a symptom of co-regulation.
Ooh,
People that have really clean, clear co-regulation tend to be great self-regulators. But the opposite is not true. So people that are really good, that just learn to self-regulate, aren't naturally good at co-regulation so much. So I think order matters. And it's just, to me, that's obvious, just looking at the lifespan development. Right? You don't have a 2-year-old child and teach them to self-regulate, although we did that some over the years, and we learned that was really wrong. So if all things being equal, as you're co-regulated with in your growing up years, you sort of naturally can take a deep breath. The voice in your head sounds like who parented you. You know, so if I strike out 5 times in a game, which I did multiple times, you know, I say some mean things to myself. But eventually a voice comes in which goes, it'll be all right. Well, just, you know, we'll figure this out. We'll get to practice. And those were the voices of my co-regulators that now I have internalized. But order matters.
Exactly. And what I like about it, I think, and help me out here, Ryan, I think that theory of attachment also holds space for both. Because an attachment, particularly now, I know people get mixed up with Bowlby's work talking about parent-child, but that's not the only way it exists, you know?
It is in some people's mind, though.
So when it gets to adult attachment, it is the ability to, yes, at moments and times, you do need to have those safe, trusted others in your corner. But what also it does give you the ability to do is to go out in life and take risk, sometimes on your own. But you carry those attachment figures with you internally. And you go out, like when we do training, sometimes we show the video by Dr. Maya Angelou, and it's called Love Liberates. And in the video, she tells a story about her mother who parented her, who deposited in her and taught her you can go out and do anything. And so Maya embodied that. She struggled with it. She's like, is mom right? I'm not sure. And I like in the video, it says, and I would go, but life would beat me down and make me call it uncle. And I would go home to my mom, and she would never say, I told you so. She would never put her down. But what Maya is showing is those reps over and over of I can self-regulate because I learned co-regulation through my mom. I can go out in a differentiated way and go live my life. But then when life kind of kicks my butt, I don't have to stay in only self-regulation. I can then go home and get some co-regulation again with mom and go back out into the world. There's that flexibility of going back and forth.
Co-regulation creates self-regulation, and we need both.
Exactly.
No doubt. The difference is, as a therapist, which one are you going for?
There we go.
So do I lean towards you and just try to teach you to self-regulate with skills, or do I do more co-regulatory things and try to affect your ability to self-regulate? And certainly there are self-regulating points throughout EFT.
They're
just small. And the EFT is not teaching them, we're affecting them, just like communication. So if you have that anxious pursuer who is protesting, I'm leaning towards and being with them in the anxious, fearful place that they're in, but that I'm showing the impact of that on the partner. I am implying to them some self-regulatory principles. I got to get you to take a breath. I got to get you to slow down. Those are self-regulating within co-regulation.
Exactly.
So this is not a one versus the other.
It's not.
It's refining how we make sense of the two concepts.
And how they fit together. Because even as you do that with that pursuer, which that's a great example, Ryan, because as you do that with that pursuer and they kind of soothe themselves, what happens is, because part of with a pursuer is a preoccupied, anxious attachment style. So they're so looking at the other person that they lose contact with themselves. So sometimes when you do that, they get their signal clear. They hear the emotional signals from their own body. They are in tune with the way they're making meaning, which then allows them sometimes to make a clearer reach for co-regulation, while they also are doing some amount of what they can of self-regulation.
Yep. Let me say this, if there's a listener here who disagrees, you're welcome to disagree.
Yeah, 100%.
And I won't be mad at you, not that you care, but let me say this, I struggle with this. I struggle with this. Early on with EFT, I remember being an externship, being like, ooh, I don't know. I don't trust that corrective experience enough, right? So that was a little bit of, we got to teach some marriage stuff, which went away before long, due to my own corrective experience. But I was heavily, heavily trained in differentiation. And so, David Schnarch's book, Constructing the Sexual Crucible, which was in reference to the therapist, actually, it's an excellent book. It's exactly the opposite of what you're hearing us say. But at the time, it was really pivotal for me, and I had a hard time. You had to like rip it out of my hand to trust EFT and to trust what we call attachment, which I'm more and more learning that what we call attachment is not how other people are defining those terms. Right. Same for differentiation, by the way. What you described right there with Maya Angelou, and how she could go out in the world in a self-regulatory, differentiated way. I love how you said that. It's healthy and balanced. Other people use that word differentiation, and it sounds just more like avoidance. Like my intellect's going to govern my emotion. I'm just not going to pay attention to it. I'm going to override it with cognitive truth. And I'm like, no, you're not. That's just avoidance. That's just avoidance, which we can come back to that a little bit later. But I'll just say I struggle with this. And so I had to come around and trust that attachment and corrective experiences with others does not create enmeshment. It's the opposite. So, I mean, really a cycle, all cycles are forms of codependency. What is codependency? Codependency is a cycle. It's someone in a cycle.
Yeah.
So it's an extreme, if you think about it as an individual. So I don't use the word codependency very often. I never tell clients that they are. I had someone ask me one time, what's the best book for codependency? I'm like, I will not tell you, unless you're reading it for you, right? But because that you're just going to pathologize attachment and longings, and at best anyway. I don't think it's the most useful term, but if you're thinking about an individual, like if you were to refer to me and say, hey, this person's really codependent, that would be the correct use of that word, because it's really quick to describe for me some behaviors, right? And that's where labels are dangerous, is they're trying to describe very sophisticated processes, and should really only be used between professionals, which is what the DSM was written for. It was never meant to have insurance reimbursement. It was never meant to give to clients, actually. And that's Vander Kolk and other people who've said that, not just me, but he's right. So anyway, all that to say, codependency is anxious avoidant on steroids. It's what that is, right? And I'll tell you the case. This is years ago in a galaxy far, far away, with an individual client who taught me this. And this person was struggling. It's an interesting case. This was a married person who was having sexual relationships outside her relationship, the affairs basically is what most people would call that. So what she would say, and didn't want to, but was having a lot of trouble stopping. That was the case, right? And so it's interesting, and I'm not putting judgment on any of that. I'm just like, these are her goals. And so in passing and looking at, hey, how does that behavior make sense? Which is how I'm always trained. What makes this make sense? If I walked in her shoes, how might I be doing the same thing that she's doing? What are the good reasons she has, as Bowlby says? And she was walking through a little bit of her attachment history early on, and she talked about her relationship with her mother. And off the cuff, this is a little bit of a playful interaction. I had a good alliance with this person, so don't let this come across as mean. This was, again, just being a bit facetious. But I said, how many times a day do you talk to your mom? This person's in their late 30s. And she says, how often a day do I talk to my mom? I'm like, yeah. She says, 35 to 55 times. And I'm like, excuse me, where does your mom live? And it was in another state. You have 50 phone calls a day to your mom. And she says, yeah. And I said playfully, well, I know what you talk about. And she says, really, what's that? I'm like, nothing. And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, 50 phone calls a day says that we actually don't have any connection, because I'm piling on all that anxious communicative properties because we can't go deep. I didn't say it exactly that way. Mm-hmm. And she sits back in her chair and takes a deep breath, and she goes, you're right. I never can really find my mom. And so that really helped me shape how I understand codependency. So codependency is not too much closeness. It's blocked closeness. So there's the problem when we see ineffective dependency. That's how Bowlby would call codependency, or avoidant attachment style on steroids, which is how I would define codependency. It's saying the same thing. It's really saying we don't have any closeness. There's not real connection. Therefore, we stack on top of it thousands and thousands and thousands of shallow interactions trying to make connection happen. The big problem with that is it looks like there's too much closeness, and what we need is more boundaries. Let's teach these people boundaries. And it's not wrong, because balanced boundaries are what we're looking for. We define that as secure attachment. The problem is we're doing complete self-regulation, which is the hardest way to find that.
Right.
So EFT offers a different pathway, which we'll talk about after this break.
Do you like the content that you're hearing on this podcast? Well, we invite you to join us on successandvulnerability.com, along with George Fowler and other EFT therapists and supervisors, where you get more thorough insight into these concepts and actually get to see it done. Once again, join us on successandvulnerability.com. All right, talk about leaning into the conversation, Ryan. I'm sure like my head's kind of like, all right, what are we saying here?
Yeah.
And I'm sure the listeners are like, wait, what is he saying?
Right.
You kind of, anyway, yeah. So I want to make sure I capture this here. I appreciate like, it's that kind of really what we're saying is it's not saturating the system, because maybe one, going like pun intended here in a way, we're not really doing it in vulnerability. It's outside of really kind of the risk.
Exactly.
And we're trying to really make these relationships operate in an emotionally safe zone, while kind of what we talk about in EFT, while not really taking the risk of going towards what probably our true longings and needs and transparency.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, if you overlay what you just said back to that client I'm referring to, the theory would be is if she and her mom could talk at the heart level, pick a word here. That's my favorite, heart level.
I like that.
Vulnerability, primary emotion. If they could talk at a deep level, she would naturally find her footing, which some people would call boundaries or integrity or secure attachment. Then they would talk maybe a time or two a week, which tends to be what most healthy, adults with parents. And obviously there's exceptions to that. I'm not trying to put a number on. I really don't care. For me, it either works or it does not work. In her instance, though, it did not work. It was directly tied to some other problems in her life, which eventually resolved really well. So yeah, if people can have that success and vulnerability, that's how you kill codependency.
I think you're right. I mean, we said it in the teasers. Is it all about attachment? The research is saying that attachment plays a significant, huge role.
It depends on how you define attachment.
If
you're talking about childhood stuff, or if you're talking about someone has to always meet your needs, then no. But how we're defining it as a threat mitigation system.
Thank you for saying that, Ryan. And that's not how Ryan and I are saying.
Right.
That, and I don't, the attachment research, if you look at Philip Shaver, Mario Michelangelo, Sue Johnson's work, Ed Tronick, they are not saying that the only way to be a healthy adult is always to look to other people to meet your needs. They would say the opposite. If you're always having to look, there's something missing.
That's an attachment disorder.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And when we're talking about attachment, I don't even mean, you should always meet the needs of your partner or your child. That's not true. And if you're trying to always meet the needs and keep them happy and keep them entertained, if the child, that's actually that's an attachment problem, not the solution.
Yeah, because then I would come right back in with that. Was like, hey, man, even as I try to lean into you, like your focus keeps going over here. This is where George always talks about building that bridge, right? Like you keep looking over there. And I can appreciate that part of you, and that probably some good things come from that. But what I keep missing here, though, is you. And this is almost like this is the self part. I do have to be able to make contact with you so you can even be in this relationship in a fulfilling way that works for all the parties of this relationship. So yes, it's not always other focused. There is a part where they need to be able to connect with self and other. I would say this is I don't know where I'm getting, I would think that's the most healthy kind of form of a relationship. When you can be connected to yourself and know what's going on with you, right, and knowing what you need to help kind of regulate, and also being able to be connected and attuned to others.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And I think, sorry, we're being really theory heavy today. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not really our brand, but I think it's been requested. So I think about 2 coins, mm-hmm, on every, you could probably do 3 coins here, but 2 for sure. Every coin has 2 sides. And I think instead of it being attachment versus differentiation, it's trying to make sense of how they fit together, because attachment and differentiation are opposite halves of the same coin, right? And the order is the distinction that we are choosing in EFT, because it's our theory of change. Mm-hmm. And it's important to remember, EFT is not a worldview, okay? It has the worldview elements in it. Sometimes people take EFT and apply it to their worldview, but EFT is not a worldview. It's not a political system. EFT is a map for change. It's an interstate. What moral system you put on it depends on who's driving that car. And it should be driven by our client's goals, by the way, not ours. But it's not a worldview. So people can get themselves in trouble sometimes trying to apply EFT to every single piece of their life, mm-hmm, when that was not designed for that. Remember, our therapeutic lenses are therapeutic. Well, it doesn't mean we take them everywhere in our life and they're going to fit perfectly. So anyway, attachment and differentiation, two different sides of the same coin. And the codependent behavior we're talking about, which is ineffective dependency, or what I called earlier, anxious avoidant on steroids, is the opposite half of the same coin of the withdrawer energy. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. Both of them are protective strategies. That's right. Codependency is protection. Mm-hmm. That sabotages connection. Shutting down in the face of distress is protection. That sabotages connection. They're the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to recognize that when you see it, because it takes some training not to go like, okay, well, here's the wrong person here. Right here, and then you get stuck in that same cycle that's happening for them. Mm-hmm. Is that making sense?
Yeah. No, I thank you for breaking that down. And I'm sorry, my mind was over here thinking about even the clients becoming enmeshed with us as therapists, right? And I mean, I'm just trying to think back through my caseload. Let me see, how can I say this? I don't think I can't see where that's happening, but I think, and I was thinking like, why are you not seeing that, James? Is it you missing something? What's going on? But here's something that stuck out even as I was asking myself that question, because as I'm working with my clients, even if we run, like if I'm doing EFIT and they're running some of the enactments through me, a key phrase that I tend to say to my clients to help them find, I always want them to find it in themselves. So that's one thing working in James's mind. So when they take a moment, and they maybe are upregulated or something's happening and they find it in themselves, I'm like, wait, can we slow down? Did you notice what you just did there? Like, even as your body began to speed up, somehow you caught it and you took this deep breath. And as you took that deep breath, then it's like you were able to find your words. I don't want to let that slide. Like, that was amazing what just happened. So can I go back? Like, even what got your body to go up, and how did you catch that? And to bring it. So here's the philosophy of why I'm doing that. I want my clients to learn their own inner world. And sometimes it takes me on the outside to help them catch the things that they can't see. And so I constantly keep doing reflections and validations to show them, like, I see the work in you. Can you see the work in you? So part of them, for me, it's like I don't want them to be dependent on me.
Right.
I want them to learn them. So then also going back, they can carry that out into their other relationships.
That's mental health.
That's it.
That's mental health, right? When you create a safety to help them get more clear in their inner world, mm-hmm, which helps them know themselves, mm-hmm, but for the purpose that they can re-enter, mm-hmm, some kind of secure connection in their life, whether it's someone next to them on the couch, mm-hmm, or someone next to them in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. But eventually mammals have to co-regulate to be mentally healthy.
Thank you.
So, I mean, that's the cornerstone of the whole thing. That's the culmination of what we're always saying. You want to go with that, or shall I go?
I'll say one more thing on that, and then we go there. And I think that's big because even when clients try and say like, "Oh, James," and I don't know how that, like, you make me feel so safe, like you help me understand me. I'll kind of say like, "Thank you so much, I appreciate that." But also, I want you to see what you did here. I want you to notice how you slowed down to be with yourself, when normally you've learned to go away from this place by focusing on others or shutting this part down. That took some discipline in your own body to calm, to soothe. And look at how you find, I keep reflecting back how you're doing it so they can map it. So that way they aren't enmeshed or dependent on me to do it. But it does take someone on the outside who, going back to Bowlby's terms, I can be the stronger, wiser other in the scary place or the hard place to help them see themselves, where maybe nobody else ever helped them do that.
Right. It takes someone on the outside when their practice has failed. Yeah. When their instincts are taking them away, when there's a sabotaging effect of how they protect themselves. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I'm just going to segue us here to sexuality for a minute, because that's part of these questions, you know. And again, I want to try to approach this from a humble direction. I have no interest in running down someone else's work. The two names I'm going to talk about here, I actually have tremendous respect for them. Mm-hmm. We're on the same team. We're all trying to describe things that are nuanced and sophisticated, and that we don't have the answers. And I will certainly tell you that. But I do want to make a distinction for the sake of having a dialogue that we can make sense of, and because people ask the question all the time. So if you look at the sexuality work of many, many people, two of the main ones being David Schnarch and Esther Perel, they draw a presupposition that is, in long-term relationships, in particular monogamous relationships, to keep the sexual spark alive, what you need is a bunch of distance and perhaps the presence of novelty to access erotic energy. So it's a differentiation model of sexuality. And I would say that is the norm in most cultures. That's the presupposition that most people assume. Attachment in EFT just has a different view of that. So, but I don't think it's necessarily which one is better. I think it's, at some level, we have a choice as people. And what I would say about that is this. If you are not willing or able to access that vulnerable connection, then they're right. Right? I mean, if you live in a 50-year relationship, and what do you talk about? Nothing. The weather, the score of the game, what happened at work today. If there's not actually any heart connection, if we don't enter pain together and comfort one another, then they're absolutely right. The only way you're going to have great sex is more distance, more novelty, maybe different techniques, or any number of things you can add there, because you're trying to create energy when energy is missing. But EFT would suggest, and attachment literature would suggest, that there's a big yes but there, which is like, hang on a minute. That might be true if we can't find each other or don't want to find each other for whatever reason. I'm not judging it. I know some relationships that when you get really close and you hear their story for 60 years, you go, hey, yep, I'm not sure I'd go there either. So this is not a judgment or right or wrong. It's just a difference. Because attachment would say you're missing the juice. You don't necessarily need more distance, more novelty, more technique, or whatever else you would add to get energy into the room. Vulnerability is an erotic energy. The deeper you go, the more you know each other. It activates the erotic version of you. And so if you have that, that is a very sexual energy. And I'll tell you where it's proven. I have my hands in the air in a quotation form. Where it's proven to me is working, 10 or 12,000 hours of affair recovery. Because and most people don't even do this, and I was trained to do this and I'm thankful for it. I take a few minutes, either one-on-one or sometimes in front of the couple, to look at how the affair happened. And what you normally see is a hold me tight conversation happening with somebody else against the agreements of this monogamy relationship, right? Because I appreciate not every relationship is monogamous, all that goes with that. But I'm referring to these kind of cases that I've worked. And so they are on a plane somewhere or someone at work, and they start saying, how was your day? And they say, you really want to know? And they say, of course. And they drop into deep vulnerability. This person, who's never hurt them, by the way, isn't dangerous, responds beautifully in attunement with their hand on their shoulder. And 48 hours later, they're in a hotel room together. And so this is it helps me see that kind of intimacy is also very erotic. And that kind of safety gives people permission to go, oh, I'm curious about this. I'm curious about me. Now I want to go play, right? Which is a sexual, erotic sharing of self, right? And so that to me is what's missing with some of the differentiation models when it comes to sexual satisfaction. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, how deep can you go? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is not very deep, then they're probably right. But if the answer is, hey, we actually have a lot of access and can go deep, I think they're probably wrong. And so, again, I think it's a choice. I think it could depend on the person and the culture and what's happened. But I just want to draw those distinctive side by side.
And I want to just support that. I mean, I was listening to a talk by Phil Shaver. And in the talk, Ryan, he highlighted the 3 key elements of an adult romantic bond. And 1 is, yes, the sexual component. 2 is still attachment, the ability in times of distress. Can you reach out for care? And then the 3rd one that makes adult romantic bonds different is the caregiving aspect. That it takes all 3 to make up an adult romantic bond. And for me, the reason why I remember that is, how are all 3 functioning together? We were just on a chat this morning with the SV team talking about the sexual cycle and how we need to be able to assess each component and deal with the breakdowns in each component. But going to the spirit of this kind of episode here, but can you also see, once again, the relationship between this ability to be dependent upon others and also have connection with some parts of self? So anyway, just appreciate you kind of even delving over back into the sexual the sexual side of things.
Yeah. I don't know if we're making it more clear or not.
But can I just also hit, even going with the whole kind of self part, this is kind of coming from some of Emily Nagoski's work in her book, Coming Together. But what Emily offers in that book, and she really challenges the readers, is how much do you even know about your sexual or erotic parts of you? Like, what gets you into your erotic zone? What are the things that bring pleasure to you? And then being able to, knowing that for yourself, but then how do you communicate that with your partner? Because what Emily would say is the key to knowing about the sexual satisfaction in any relationship, the way she would measure it, what the literature shows her is do all partners involved have the ability to mutually talk about pleasure?
Right.
So,
which requires safety and security.
Right.
As opposed to differentiation, which is like, I can go seek the pleasure, but I'm not necessarily going to tell you in a vulnerable way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge difference.
Exactly.
So I got kind of 3 points.
Go ahead.
And I don't know if we've made it more clear or less, but I hop back to a case. Top 5 difficult case in my entire career. This is 7-8 years ago. And every contraindicator was present. Two of the contraindicators in EFT happened in the middle of the treatment. We had to start all over multiple times. Saw this case, hundreds of sessions, and this person, if you're looking for someone to diagnose codependency, there's a picture of her in the dictionary. And in the middle of our cases, many, many times, she screams at me. And I just remember her so many times. She would talk about, he doesn't choose me. And she would put her hands up in there and shake them. She'd shake. He never chooses me. Right. And you look at her partner and the partner's kind of rolling their eyes. And I'm like, oof, this is stage 1 couple. But you could easily say, well, that's her trauma. That's codependency, and it was. And it was. And I just want to say EFT is perfectly written for her, for them. It takes a lot of patience. You got to hang in there. And we had to slow their relationship cycle down, which she protested heavily. Sounds a lot like this. So only way this is going to work then is I just need to be happy all the time. There's that pursuer protest. We had to work with that for a while. And then as we got into later stages, we went deep into her trauma story and deep into the partner's trauma story, which both of them had plenty. And then they had this new way, these new bridges to find each other in this depth. And I mean, within a few months, the symptoms of codependency went away. Just gone. And so I saw the partner twice, like 2 years later, and the partner goes, it's amazing. We're incredible. The things that my partner used to do just doesn't do anymore. And then I saw her socially a few times. It was awkward. And in her description, you can just see there's just a different regulation system in play. Because of the secure connection, she was able to self-regulate in different ways. And I want to qualify. But what about people who can't get that in their most important relationship? I think this is a really key point, and that is then we grieve. We don't just replace it. We don't just teach the skill. We spend time in the space where that longing remains unfulfilled. We organize this. We help them get more and more in touch with the pain of this, which is a form of co-regulation, by the way. And then even then, I still don't think it's all about self-regulation. Now it's about how do we regulate in the community alongside your self-regulation. Yep. So I think that's something we should say more often. When a human relationship is not available, make sure we grieve that vacancy that's there.
Well, I like those 2 points. One, thank you for that. Then we grieve, because that is you can't. It's. I wish all of our clients could have, a Hollywood ending in a way, but it doesn't always go that way. But then two, I like when you said this kind of co-regulation alongside self-regulation. That's the picture I think we've been trying to paint here.
Yep.
Is that they go side by side. Why do we have to pit into one camp or the other? Like, that's just not like, we don't see that in any mammal. Like, even animals, they have an ability to have territory and to roam, but no animal also wants to be left out in the wild by itself. It wants a few people like mammals to be able to kind of connect with. So, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I had an old professor invite me to a course online, and he's hardcore differentiation. And I respect this person immensely, actually. He's a professor of mine. He's really good at this. And he's like, I don't agree with what you do. I'm like, understood. I feel the same way about you. But I love you anyway. And we laughed, and it was good. And he goes, so look, you teach people to connect. We teach people to find their own space, to learn to self-regulate, which then makes space for a relationship. So isn't attachment and differentiation the opposite half of the same coin? Like, absolutely they are. My clients, after they connect, multiple times, culture shift, all that, they will look just like the same thing you're trying to get your clients to do. So yeah, they're the opposite half of the same coin. They're equal. Except for one thing, order matters. Because when I divide you to go work on your differentiation, can it work? I mean, who knows what can or can't work. But I've taken you the most painful way possible. It's the most painful way possible. It's not the natural order of the mammalian brain structure.
Exactly.
If I know that I can find the herd when I need them, I don't need them as much. If I know I can access you relationally, now my body frees me up to be interdependent, which means I can come to you when I need to. I can go by myself when I don't, which is actually the same thing as differentiation, at least differentiation understood well. But the order matters. If at all possible, I want to work in relationship or in the grief of not having the relationship as we help people become more interdependent. Codependency is killed by deep, secure connection. What Bowlby said is effective dependency is functionally the right definition of differentiation, which is the ability to be by myself and to be with other. That flexibility, we're all trying to find the same thing. Notice how our lane and whoever there is, their lane is trying to get to the same place, which is really good information to say, yeah, that's what works. Being flexible. There's a flexibility, a movability there that's really, really effective. But order matters. Our bias would say order matters. So opposite halves the same coin, attachment and differentiation.
Hey, Ryan, thank you for the discussion. I want to appreciate, we think people, I just want to think, because I know Ryan has been sitting on this for about a year or so, because just trying to be so really honoring and not trying to rain on anybody, trying to be sensitive to the many different perspectives here. But thank you for leaning into it, though. We got to have these kind of conversations to get clearer,
And that's what it is. It's a dialogue. There's a lot of sophisticated nuance, culture, complexities, different stages of life. We're painting broad strokes here.
And now you help me out when this question comes up at a training, which it always does. I'm going to say, go to episode such and such and come back to me tomorrow.
Yeah, it's important dialogue, man. It's important stuff.
All right. And once again, we didn't get to it, but thank you all for what you're doing for holding space for people who are battling with what we're even talking about here, where some of your clients in moments of when they feel fearful, they want to just only rely on self-regulation and try and talk their partner or partners into only self-regulating. But, then there's sometimes where you have the client who's they've lost all contact with self and they're only relying on people outside of them. This is the battle we fight. This is what we signed up for. But it's a beautiful fight. It's good work.
Yeah, I want to say thank you like we always do, specific to this, because our profession makes this hard. And because of confidentiality and privacy, if nothing else, we're often having to self-regulate. We're having to differentiate. So I thank you for the fact that you take that on your body. I would use this to encourage. I hope you have a community, whether it's in your city or church or some other organization, or join an EFT community, because co-regulation will keep you in this game longer. But to some degree, there is some self-regulation we have to do. So I want to say thank you for doing that hard work.
Thank you for listening. We hope this experience helps you push the leading edge in your work to help people connect with themselves and with each other. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a 5-star review. You can contact us at pushtheleadingedge@gmail.com, and you can follow us on our Facebook page at Push the Leading Edge. You can follow Ryan on Facebook at Ryan Rana Professional Training, and on his website, ryanranatraining.com. You can follow James on Facebook and Instagram at DocHawkLPC. You can also check out his website, DocHawkLPC.com.